I just want to pick up on a few of these key lessons and factors that we, in our 45 reports, have concluded are fundamental to DFID's ability to maximise the achievement of impact and do so on a sustainable basis. And these lessons apply as much to the work done through multilaterals as it does to bilaterals. In Africa, we've been to nearly 20 countries, and several of those we've been to more than once. So we've formed a very rich view of the nature of the work carried out in Africa on the basis of that. And I just wanted to illustrate a few of the points that Graham's referred to. The importance of achieving impact in the long term, the importance of multiple reinforcing interventions, and the importance of beneficiary focus and engagement. So far as the importance of long-term impact is concerned, well, clearly DFID does do a lot of long-term work, but as Graham said, the average length of the programme is only 3 years. That, of course, is not nearly long enough to achieve impact in any number of the areas that they're involved in, whether it's nutrition, education. We've all been to school, we know it takes a long time to educate a child. But when you get into areas of security and justice, anti-corruption, these are very long-term things, particularly, of course, in fragile contexts where the issues are even greater. Our concerns have been that the results agenda has achieved a great deal, but that there have been inevitable trade-offs, and that the unintended consequence has in many instances tended to be a focus on quantity and the short-term achievement of results rather than quality and long-term. And some examples of that, for instance, our reports on education. We've done a number of these in Africa. We've looked at Nigeria, Rwanda, Ethiopia and Tanzania. And our concerns were that the emphasis was on enrolment of children in school. That provides, of course, upfront announceable figures as to numbers of children enrolled, but to be enrolled you only need to turn up on day one. There don't have to be any teachers, there certainly don't have to be qualified teachers, it doesn't involve actually achieving exam results at the end of any period, or even really being able to read or write in anything other than the most basic way. So our reports have emphasised the need to focus on quality, which of course is a long-term endeavour. And DFID has absolutely taken that challenge up and is working much better in terms of quality. But of course it's a tougher one a tougher nut to crack. And our follow-up report that we'll be publishing shortly will have a particular focus on that. Certainly implementers, contractors and NGOs do feel under pressure to achieve results at speed. We've heard of contractors going for the easier option in terms of the way in which they're going to deliver a program. So for instance, in Ethiopia, focusing on working in and around Addis rather than getting out to the harder to reach rural areas where the need is greater, in order to be able to deliver cheaper, faster results. In Malawi, we saw a grant-making machinery being launched before the relevant management systems were in place. We've also seen the pressure to achieve geographic spread and scale. In Malawi, when we were looking at security and justice, the community justice programming was actually really rather good, but it was being spread far too thinly with an attempt to scale up right across the country at speed, rather than focusing in depth on getting things right and only then scaling up appropriately. So we saw tribunal members of village tribunals being given a one-off, one-day training on some extremely complex issues: human rights, equality, precedent, the recording of decision-making and so forth. All to be done on one day only training, which of course many people, in particular female members, weren't able to attend. In terms of multiple reinforcing interventions and the importance of that, Graham's talked about the way in which DFID operates at macro level, regulatory, institutional reform, mid-level, for instance, markets for the poor, improving access to markets, and micro, whether it's microfinance, improving farming techniques, etc. We've seen some very good examples of that. We thought in nutrition that was working well. In Africa, we reviewed the work in Zambia on that. In Nigeria, we thought the governance programming had a good mixture of building up government capacity and doing work at community level. But we have been concerned that DFID's management systems, driven by the results agenda, neither encourage nor capture portfolio and more complex results. And so when we were looking at private sector development in Tanzania, whilst there were a great many good programs, they tended to be a bit of a list rather than what I would call a strategy. And what we didn't see was adequate join-up between what was being done at a macro level down to the micro level. And we, in our report, suggested that they ought to work out what were the principal obstacles in any given country that were putting barriers in place for the economic development in that country. And then within that problem, work out what could DFID, as an aid agency, actually do to tackle that. And in Tanzania, by way of example, land tenure is a huge problem. It's a common feature. And we felt that there could be a clearer link between, at the micro level, improving farmers' farming techniques, agricultural techniques, through to accessing markets, through to land registration at the macro level. And we've been very pleased to see in the time that we've been making these kind of recommendations, the development of the country poverty diagnostic tool, which we believe will make an enormous difference, does do this. It analyzes what are the blockages, what are the problems in context in that particular country. We are concerned that that doesn't look backwards enough and that currently it doesn't translate through well enough into actual operational plans, but we will watch with interest how that develops. In terms of coherence, Graham's talked about the disconnect between central programming and in-country programming. And a few examples of that are, in Kenya, we found that country staff were apparently wholly unaware of the centre's agricultural research work. In Rwanda, I went and saw some of the 26 innovation projects which the DFID office was working with the Rwandan government on. These were innovation pilot projects to work out what could then be selected for appropriate for scale-up by the country and the government across the country. The DFID Centre had one innovation programme that wasn't linked with the other 26, and even though we thought it was a pretty good programme, it was very hard to see how it was ever going to participate in this government-led 26 innovation project analysis. And in Somalia, with the Girls' Education Challenge Fund, we saw that the Somalia office had decided against prioritising education for a number of reasons, and had no longer got an education advisor. But the Girls' Education Challenge Fund, run centrally, decided they were going to do education in Somalia, notwithstanding the fact that the DFID office didn't have any capability to do it at all. I mean, this, as DFID well recognises, this really needs to be pulled together in a more coherent way. And then just lastly, on beneficiary focus and engagement, we do believe very strongly that what we've seen of DFID's work, it works at its best when there is as much real quality engagement with the intended beneficiaries, using community structures, building those into the wider governance systems. And we've seen that working well in fragile states such as Sudan and the Horn of Africa, as well as more stable states such as Ghana.